Welcome back to the Funding Blueprint, the show where we dive into how today's most ambitious startups turn bold ideas into traction, funding, and real momentum. I'm your host, Christina Norman, and today's guest is Brennan Tobin, the founder of Oddduck Marketing Group, a social commerce agency behind some of the fastest growing DTC brands on TikTok Shop and beyond. Brennan's team has helped high-power performing names like Sarah Belli, Friday Pickleball, Dr. Bird, Frog Fuel, and Thigh Society, and he's no stranger to the scrappy realities of early-stage growth, having built and scaled multiple brands himself. In this conversation, we get into the raw side of customer acquisition, how to know when your systems are breaking as you scale, what most founders get wrong when marketing their startup, and why TikTok Shop is rewriting the rules of direct-to-consumer commerce. So whether you're chasing your first 100 customers or building for your next 10,000, Brennan drops real-world insight on what it takes to evolve your offering, pivot with purpose, and stay ahead in a fast-moving market. Let's get into it. Brennan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Yeah, of course. We're so excited to have you. So let's kind of just jump right into it. One of the biggest hurdles for any founder is getting those first few customers through the door, especially without a big budget or team. So you've built multiple brands from the ground up. So my question is, what are some of the most unexpected lessons you've learned about acquiring those first 100 customers?
Yeah, I think we could probably spend the whole podcast just on this one question probably, but I'll try and answer it briefly. But I think it's going to be slightly industry dependent as well. So what I would say for a B2B SaaS brand is going to be a lot different than what I would say for a D2C brand. But just to give, and we can double click it anywhere, but to give some guidance of what I think founders should do for acquiring first customers is to try and sell before they actually have the product. I think a lot of times founders, especially early on, they fall in love with the idea as opposed to falling in love with the distribution. And so what we'll see is a founder will spend 6 months putting together a website, trying to find the right product, having this idea, they'll talk to people, and then they actually try and go and sell the thing and nobody goes and buys it. And there's just 6 months wasted. We have a brand in our portfolio that, their second year of business, they're doing over $10 million in sales. And it's because when they had an idea for the product, they made a very basic a very basic mock-up of the product, went and put together a really ugly one-page website and went and ran Facebook ads to see if people would purchase this product that they had an idea for. And when they realized that, hey, if we can sell, $100 on 20 or, $20 to $50 all in, that's a pretty good product. Let's scale this up. And so I think the best thing I can say is don't waste time on things that don't really move the needle. Don't fall in love with the product. Fall in love with, am I actually offering something people want to buy?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's easy to think that the systems that you start with will carry you through, but kind of like you mentioned, more often than not, what works at launch doesn't necessarily scale. Early growth often requires a very different approach than scaling. And you've had some experience navigating that transition. So what are some systems or strategies that worked well at the beginning, but later had to be completely scrapped or rebuilt?
Yeah, I think early on, again, if you're able to, if you're a D2C brand and you're just selling a product, I think it's probably best to try and sell at scale much earlier on. Just because, again, you're selling a product, the demand is someone going to buy this thing, and then you'll get feedback on, what needs to be iterated on, but you really need to test demand. If you're selling something like B2B SaaS, right, I think it's a little bit different. And early on, I would say what should be different is that you should have more intimate conversations with your customers and you should be setting yourself up to properly scale. So I have a friend who works at a company called Adaptive, which was started by Brian Long, who founded Attentive as well, which is one of the biggest SMS advertising platforms. And they just did a $60 million round. And what they started with was they just went out to brands, and same concept applied. They had an idea for a product. They showed concepts on a PowerPoint and said, is this something you would buy? And had conversations with those brands. They didn't go for really big brands where they had to really over deliver. And if they screwed up offering it to a Walmart, their business would essentially be done. They would have to scale up distribution to serve them. What they did instead was they found a couple of brands early on that were good fits, good logos you could throw on a page where they're saying, okay, they want to try this. They know we're new to it. They are interested in this. They will buy it when we have the product. Let's build the product for them, figure out what they want. And I think early on, that's what's key, is being able to have clients that, one, aren't going to be the kiss of death. I think everybody early on wants to sell to the Fortune 500s of the world. And the fact of the matter is, like, if you're going to sell to the Fortune 500s of the world, you have to deliver, a high quality product. And early on, I think being scrappy to offer something that solves a problem, but you can have a one-on-one conversation with the customer, and it's not going to be a conversation of, hey, we're paying you, or hey, you have our name, don't waste our time. I think that's what's going to be huge, is are we positioning ourselves for scale by putting ourselves in a position to understand how to best address the needs of the market? Was like a belabored way of saying that, I think.
Yeah. And I'm kind of curious, is there a specific, can you pinpoint like a specific point in time when founders should kind of be shifting from that hustle, scrappy startup mode to scale mode?
I think it's, oh man, and I don't want to get like too, I want to try and keep it business focused, but I think it's going to be different for every founder. We have a founder who bootstrapped a $40 million D2C brand over, almost 20 years now. And so for a lot of people, they would have seen, hey, we're not really seeing sales in those first 4 to 5 years. But this person in particular wanted to stay. So I think it's a question of your own personal goals of, what is it that I want to build here? Do I want to build a company that goes fast? Am I working on something that I want to work on over the course of my career, in which case I'm willing to go a little bit slower? And I think that really guides that question. But as a whole, I think you will get kind of a sense when you're building a startup of, okay, do we need to pivot? Do we need to start? Are we at a point where, we've been scrappy enough, we have all the learnings, now we can go and scale this up, or we need to change things a little bit? But I would say once you really understand the market and know the learnings is when you would probably pivot, right? Like with my own agency, for example, we started off as basically a total growth agency. We did Facebook ads and Google ads because that was kind of the hot thing, and it's what I spent 5 or 6 years of my career on prior to going off on my own. And so I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I do this better than everybody else. But I quickly learned that, hey, during the 5 years of my career, businesses had already been doing this for a very long time. This isn't a new thing to the market that people want. And so I took one deal that was early on for TikTok Shop, and it was kind of a new thing. And I realized, hey, this is actually what the market's demanding now, because, businesses have already been built around this, industry trend, but there's a new one that is seeing a lot of tailwinds that I can build in. And so I just kind of got that learning of, hey, there's an opportunity to go further with something else, and this makes a lot more sense, and I'm going to make this pivot because it's more aligned with my goals. So that's what I would say is when you really get the learnings under your belt of, okay, I understand this industry now. I understand how this business model works. Is it time to be more scrappy? Do I still need to be scrappy and get more insights, or am I ready to build something that the market wants at large?
Yeah, definitely. Kind of wanting to elaborate on, having to pivot your business. So many founders have to wrestle with the idea of sticking to their original plans, or like you mentioned, the idea of pivoting. But it's not always obvious when the moment is right to pivot. Like you said, you've had to make some tough calls on evolving your own brand. So my next question is, are there clear signals that founders can, keep their eyes out for, that are telling them it's time to pivot, whether it's the offer, the team, the customer, or the brand itself?
No. Well, like sort of, but like I feel like it's scary each and every single time, because it feels like you're making such a dramatic shift. And the only thing I can say that alleviates some of that pain is your pivot. I like to think of it as a minimum viable product almost. Like if you change a small thing and you still, for example, with my agency, we, again, total growth agency, started to notice TikTok Shop was an important signal. We still remained a growth agency, and we're like, let's lead with TikTok Shop. And let me change my LinkedIn profile to scaling TikTok shops, and let's have that be the first offer on our website, and let's just see how this goes without getting rid of the other stuff, because we don't want to fall into shiny object syndrome. So I think there's never really a good time until you start to see, hey, okay, we did this change slightly and we're seeing that more traction is picking up here. Now we can go and make a bigger shift and go all in onto this pivot, as opposed to just making the shift and being like, well, we hope this works.
How do you, I guess you kind of were just mentioning, executing a pivot without kind of concerning your early supporters. Because if they're, gung-ho on your original plan and then you kind of switch things up, you don't really want to raise any red flags. So do you have any kind of tips or tricks?
Yeah, I think it's honestly just knowing that nobody cares about it as much as you probably do. I think we think that, people are going to read our company tagline a lot. I don't think, since I've closed a client, I don't think they've gone back to my website to see, updates about it, or, really checked my LinkedIn profile too much. We're still delivering the service that was promised to them. And I honestly haven't had any clients where, because about half of our revenue is TikTok Shop now, and half of it is actually still legacy. But the TikTok Shop revenue happened a lot more quickly. So I haven't had any clients say anything yet. So honestly, the best advice I can give is, one, you're probably not going to be in as deep as you think you are, and people are not going to care about your business as much as you are. And then two, I would say, if there are concerns from current customers about the direction you're going, it's just one more data signal, and that you need to keep in mind of, hey, maybe we're going too quickly, or hey, we're making this shift, but some of we're gonna realize that we're gonna lose some of our old customers that like the old product a lot more, but we know that it's still a shift in the right direction, which is better for the business, and hopefully you can alleviate them and try and get them on the new product. But at the end of the day, that's just business. It's hard to have a product that is one size fits all and that you can scale.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of shifting a little bit here into the more marketing. So startup marketing often can feel like a guessing game at first. Obviously, there's so many channels, so little budget, and pressure, to see those results fast. And it can be overwhelming for early stage founders. So from your perspective, I know you talked a lot about TikTok Shop, which we'll get into in a bit. Which channels should a startup prioritize first, and why? And at what point does it make sense to bring in an agency or hire an in-house marketer rather than, kind of handling it yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I'll probably answer the second question first and then go to the first one. And I'll say that it probably doesn't make sense to do an agency until you understand your own marketing well enough that you can hire an agency and know that they're going to do good work. I think a lot of people think, hey, I'm going to hire the expert right out of the gate. First of all, if they're a good agency and you don't have any ad spend behind you, they probably shouldn't be taking you, because it's a lot harder to grow a company than it is to optimize a company. We always recommend that we take clients that are spending at least $20,000, $30,000 a month in ad spend. Otherwise, it's just, hey, maybe they haven't figured out product market fit and there's too much for us to figure out for them. So I'll start with that. Is if you're a founder and you're trying to figure out marketing, it's probably best to do it internally early on, just so that you, again, one, know that you have product market fit and can sell at scale, and two, you know what to hire for when it is time to outsource that function to focus on higher leverage tasks. Going back to the earlier question, which I believe was, what channels should you focus on? Again, I think it's going to be slightly industry dependent, right? So if you're selling B2B, it's going to make a lot more sense for you to be on Google, where you can capture demand, where people are searching, right? If somebody's looking for a CRM platform, they're probably going to search on Google, and that's probably a channel I would start with. Or you could start on LinkedIn, because hey, you know what your ICP is. We can go and get in front of them. They're people that are white collar. Let's go and make sure we're running ads that target them. If you're D2C, you're probably going to be selling a lot more on kind of the Facebook and Instagram side or the TikTok side, and that's where you're going to have to learn about those channels to figure out which one's best for your business. Again, selling a pickleball paddle, people might be searching for that a lot more, and it might be a lot easier of a purchase to make on Google search than it would be on Facebook ads or something like that, just to give an example. And I don't even think that's a good one, but that's what I would say is it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and you're going to have to, one, make the decision based on what's making sense in your industry, but then two, stick with it long enough to know that that it is or isn't going to work. I think a lot of times people will spend, maybe $500 on marketing on Facebook ads, and they'll say, well, it just doesn't work for our business. And it's kind of like I don't know, swinging a baseball bat once and saying, well, hey, you know what, I'm not going to be able to play this sport. You actually have to get the reps in. You have to test it out. You need to exhaust as many angles as possible where you can say, hey, I understand at least 95% of this platform that works, and we've tested it, and we've tested all these different angles, and we followed best practices, and we've tried throwing a bunch of different things at the wall, and we spent maybe $6,000 and it just over 3 months, and it didn't work. And I think that's when you can really say, hey, this channel doesn't work, let's move on to the next one. But usually when you get to that stage, you're probably going to figure out, okay, what marketing does work for your brand.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of want to hone in a little bit on TikTok here. Obviously, social commerce is having a huge moment, especially with the rise, like you mentioned, of TikTok Shop. It's totally shaking up the way people buy online. So for founders trying to stay ahead of the curve, it's tough to know where to invest their time and resources, like we've mentioned. So how are you thinking about social commerce in your current ventures? And what should brands or companies know about winning on TikTok versus those, I guess, quote unquote, traditional e-commerce platforms?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and this is where, kind of calling back to an earlier point where I said, hey, we wouldn't take a brand that isn't spending this much at least. For TikTok Shop, I think it's even higher up, right? Like we won't take brands on TikTok Shop unless there's, already a 7-figure to a 9-figure brand. So I think social commerce is amazing and really exciting, and I think a lot of brands are being built on it from scratch where they wouldn't have been able to build that brand on Facebook or an Instagram just because it's early. And if you're an electrolyte brand trying to advertise on Instagram and you're going up against the liquid IVs of the world, like it's going to be really hard. But if you're an electrolyte brand and you were first on TikTok before they were there, hey, you were capturing attention that you weren't going to be able to get on another platform. So I think it's typically, I'm kind of recommending, at least within my own business, that we go after brands that are already established to get them on the trend. I also think it moves the trend forward a lot better. I think one of the problems that TikTok was able to solve was kind of it's a chicken and the egg problem of, hey, to make social commerce work, you need people buying great brands. Great brands don't want to be doing the thing that's entirely new. Like Walmart's not going to go and invest on TikTok Shop because they won't be able to control it because it's too exploratory for their business and too risky. So TikTok Shop did a great job solving that. So we are kind of focused on, hey, to progress social commerce forward and to get the best clients possible. We can now take this, what is a semi-proven concept, and take these great brands and put them there. But other than that, if it's, if you're just starting a new brand, I think TikTok Shop can work, but I actually wonder if figuring out a different channel is going to be a lot easier, because it's still the case that, you're going to shop on Amazon at some point this week. Anybody you talk to is going to, right? Or, I'm going to buy something from the web at some point this week. If you were to ask, my mom if she was going to buy something on TikTok Shop this week, she'd probably ask what that is. So not everybody still knows it. So you kind of have to know where you're going and what your brand is and how it plays with those two, those two fields of, hey, we want to make sure we're, in a place where we can capture early attention, but at the same time, if we're too early and we can't, fund what is already a brand new platform where, content is really king and we need to get a ton of content, it might make sense to go a different route. But hopefully that answers that. I feel like I went a long-winded route on that question, just like I have on a couple of these ones during this whole interview. So hopefully that's good.
No, it's great, and definitely a lot of great information packed in there. Kind of taking a step back now, at the early stage of business, there's obviously no playbook, no rule book to follow, just resourcefulness and intuition and trial and error, as we've mentioned. But after, having experience with multiple different brands, going through it a few times, I imagine you've picked up a few non-obvious strategies that consistently move the needle. So if you were to start from zero today, where would you begin? Like looking back, if you had to create a founder playbook for launching and growing a DTC or consumer facing brand, what would the first 3 moves you make be?
Yeah, I think move one would be to find an industry with a lot of tailwinds. I think a lot of people, they have products that they love that they've had for so long where they'll say, you know what, I'm going to start a supplement brand. I'm going to start a protein brand. And it's kind of like, do you know, you'll never beat the incumbents, or it's so difficult to beat those incumbents, right? If you're going to go and set up an ad, and you're going up against the, I don't know, whatever the biggest whey protein isolate brand is, they're spending, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a month in advertising. And that's what you're going up against. And you probably don't have a better angle than them. And even if you do have a better angle than them, there's probably such a small section of people that actually care about that angle, where it's like the incumbent, even if they service the end consumer 90% better, or 90% as well, and you can do it 100% as well, I don't think people are really caring too much about that 10%, as crazy as that is to say. I think that's probably some advice I was given in the past that is like, if you can just be 1% better, you'll win. I actually don't think that's true. So I would say find an industry with a lot of tailwinds, things like AI. Pickleball is a really big growing sport, and we've seen brands that just pop up and they're blowing up right now. And so you do this for 2 reasons. One, it's growing. So even if you are the average is growing. 2, there's a lot fewer brands that you're competing against, right? If you start a pickleball brand, and I don't know why I'm going with this example, but I love it. You're going up against a brand called Selkirk. That's the incumbent. Most people watching this probably don't know what Selkirk is. But if you were to start a baseball bat, you're going up against like the Nikes of the world, the Wilsons of the world. That's a huge different battle. The second thing I would say is, now that you've picked your industry, step 2 is, what's the product? What's our differentiator? What is kind of the gap in the market? And you can even use AI to answer some of these questions of, hey, what's currently being served? What's not being served? You can scour Reddit, Google Trends of what's missing in the market right now. Ideally, if you know the market, if you're a consumer, if you play pickleball, for example, and you're like, there's no, these paddles are really expensive and they shouldn't be. And people are getting in with, people want to get in with friends, so we could sell 2 for, $99, whereas most people are selling 1 paddle for $250, and we can still get them a really good quality paddle, which is actually a client of ours and how they've grown their business. Then that's an angle you can go, is let me go and test this theory. And then 3 is what I said at the beginning of this episode, is just launch, test it, try. Don't ask people to say, don't ask your dad of do you think this is a good idea? Your girlfriend of, hey, do you think this could work? And then, noodle on that for 6 months. Just go and try and sell the thing. You don't have to build it yet. Get an ugly mock-up in Canva and try and sell the thing and try and advertise the thing. And if it works, great. Go and build the thing and then fulfill those orders. If it doesn't, cancel those orders and say, hey, sorry, we're out of stock on this, been fully refunded, what have you. See if there's a market before you go and commit your life to it. So that's kind of it. Those would be my first 3 moves, is pick something that is going to work or gives you the highest probability of success, figure out what is currently being underserved there, and then just go and try and sell that thing before you invest all the time building it, because that's how you can test, 30 ideas for, within a year, as opposed to, hey, we tested 1 idea in a year and it just didn't work. The more at-bats you can have, the higher likelihood you're going to have of success. And I think there is a great CEO somewhere who said, I've done 30 different businesses, 1 hit, and it worked really, really well. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. And then to kind of wrap things up, flashing forward to where you are now, how do you personally structure your decision-making framework as a founder today? Are there any specific tools or routines that kind of help you stay grounded while making these fast-paced, high-stakes calls?
Yeah, definitely. It's process, at least for an agency. It's, you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall to your systems. And so if we have, brands that we're trying to scale on TikTok, it's, everything has a a standard operating procedure of this is what you do for affiliates on TikTok. This is how we get content. This is how we run ads. This is the touch points we have with our client, because when you're just starting out, those things don't really matter as much. You're just kind of, hey, we're trying to get you results. Hopefully it works. But when you start to scale and it can't be just you, or you need more teams, or hey, you're dealing with hundreds of orders, thousands of orders, or tens of clients, you can't be an individual contributor anymore. You need processes of what everything's going to do, how you talk to clients, how often you talk to clients, how you fulfill orders within what time frame, what emails you send the client or what emails you send a consumer if they make an order. So I'm a really big fan of just having great processes in place and then having talent that can execute it as well, right? So I think even if you have great processes, you can have B players and they're going to execute it. But if you have A players and great processes, they're going to find even more processes to better things, and they're going to need a lot less training on the processes to succeed. But that's what I would say is just have great processes and, if possible, the best talent possible.
Yeah, that's great. Well, unfortunately, that is a wrap on today's episode of the Funding Blueprint. A huge thank you to you, Brennan, for sharing such practical wisdom and some real-world experience on today's show. From the challenges of acquiring your first customers to the complexities of scaling and pivoting, you reminded us that building a successful brand isn't just about quick wins. It's also about adaptability, smart marketing, and knowing when to evolve. So whether you're launching your first venture or preparing to scale, Brennan's insights offered a clear blueprint for sustainable growth. And Brennan's work at Oddduck Marketing is helping brands navigate the fast-moving world of social commerce and startup marketing with confidence and creativity. So if this conversation sparked any ideas for you, be sure to check out his work at Oddduck Marketing and connect with him. As always, thanks for tuning into the Funding Blueprint. If today's episode resonated, share it with a fellow founder, subscribe for more, leave a review, and stay connected for more honest conversations about building and growing startups the right way. We'll see you next time.